Okay, in this lesson, we're going to build on what we learned with using linear gradients, and we're going to use radial gradients. And all that means is that rather than starting on one side and moving left to right or diagonally, we start in the middle, and we're going to talk about how we can do a little bit different, play around with that a little bit, but we're going to start in the middle and go outwards. We're going to radiate outwards, uh, going along the radius of a circle. So you can see here we have a radial gradient as opposed to linear gradient. Still have the same types of things that we need to work with in terms of putting some prefixes on our code so that different browsers, older browsers, can understand this CSS3. This does not work in older browsers. Older versions of Internet Explorer. This is Internet Explorer 10.0 and moving forward. But so you get your radial gradient, background colon radial gradient, red, green, blue. So red, green, blue. Okay, so that's the first thing that I want you to do. Take this code, and you'll start off and change it so it's you can create a div ID grade 1. That's what I have, and then radial gradient red, green, blue. Okay, that's the first thing. And then what I want you to do is understand that they don't all have to be exactly the same. We didn't really do this with linear, but you can specify different spaces or different amounts of space that you want for the colors to be. So right now these are evenly spaced. It's the same number of red, same amount of red, same amount of green, same amount of blue. But let's say that you want to make it look a little different. So let's say we're going to do 5% red and 15% green and then 80% blue. So let's see what that looks like. Looks a little different, okay? And this is where you can really have complete control over what you want your picture to look like, what you want your images to look like. All right, so let's see what we can do here. Let's do 25% green, 15%, 25% red, 15% green, and then 60% blue. See what that looks like. All right, so you're the one who has control right now over how this whole thing looks. So the next thing that you can do is you can specify what shapes you want this to be, or really you have two choices. One is an ellipsis, which is what this is. This is an ellipsis, right? So it's not a pure circle. It's more like like an egg or an elongated circle. But if you want, you can change that and specify a circle. So it defaults to an ellipsis, but you can specify a circle if you want. So let's take a look at that. All right, so it's a circle and it radiates outward as a circle. So let's change that just to see what that would look like if we take away our percentages. Okay, so you can see it just goes out, it radiates outward from the circle, but not as an ellipsis, but as a circle. Okay, so let's take a look at, we've changed this to a circle. We have our red, green, and blue. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change this. And this is something that you really just have to experiment with just to get the images that you like, or the balance of color that you like. But I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say 10, 20 blue, and 10% for red, 20% for green, and 10% for blue. And let's see if I like the way that looks. Okay, so that's interesting. But watch what happens when I change this. And we didn't do this for linear, so this is new. So this specifies a radial gradient. Watch this. I'm going to change this to a repeating radial gradient. And watch some of the cool things that you can do once you add this repeating into your code. What? So again, this is something you just are going to experiment with. You can change the colors and experiment with how much of any particular color you want. Let's change that to 10%. And you can do some really fun and cool things and play around with that. And I'm going to leave you to that. I'm just going to let you repeat a radial gradient. I'm confident that now that you have the power to do this, that I will be seeing some of these in your showcase, because it's too cool to not start experimenting with. All right. So that's the radial gradient, and I think next we're doing some text decorations, which are pretty neat.